Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be my full review of this knife, and this is the Gunslinger Jack from Jack Wolf Knives. And so this is the second release of the Gunslinger Jack. It's being released here in March of 2024, and specifically on March 15th. But it is the second release, and probably being released sooner than a lot of people might have expected. And the reason for that, from what Ben has said, is that these were in really high demand. So he would get requests every day, multiple times a day for people hoping that the Gunslinger would be re-released since it was originally released. So I was excited to see it because when the Gunslinger first came out, and this is my Gunslinger Jack from the first run, I really loved this knife. I thought that Ben did such a great job of translating the gunstock pattern to a modern knife, more so than other knives that I've had that are modern interpretations of traditional patterns, particularly with like a lock and one-hand opening. And so I really love this knife and thought that they just did a great job of making the gunstock pattern a modern knife. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people who missed out on that run and were really looking to get one of these. So I'm happy to see that they are re-releasing this, relatively early. And there are some really cool options in this run. Now, as you can see, I went with the Ironwood version. And this is actually my first natural handle material for a Jack Wolf knife. They have done wood handles before, but this is the first one that I have gotten in wood. And the reason for that is because this is, to me, it seems like the extra fancy, like bougie, or however you want to say it, version of the Gunslinger Jack. It just seems really, really classy, and that is in large part because of the combination of a couple different things. So this doesn't just have beautiful ironwood handles, so I'll show you a closer look at those. You can see that it has really nice grain. I've got kind of a knot, maybe two knots, in my show side cover there, and just really nice grain on the back. Hopefully you'll be able to see it at some points in the video here, but there's actually a little bit of chatoyance, the kind of shininess that some wood has in this, is particularly right here around this knot. So really beautiful. But then that combined with the polished titanium on this clip and the backspacer. So these are not steel, this is polished titanium. And I really like how they did this polished titanium because, if everything was polished, if it was just completely polished looking, it wouldn't look too much different than just a normal stainless steel clip and backspacer. But it is titanium, and you can tell that because with this line down the center of the pocket clip, you can see where inside that kind of fuller, or whatever you want to call that, it is stonewashed like the rest of the titanium, other than the hardware, the screws. And then along the edges also there. And then this back spacer, really nicely polished, very, very polished. I would say it's not something I see a whole lot of, is polished titanium. And I think that it looks good. It has maybe a little bit of a different look and feel than steel. But, I don't know, maybe I'm imagining that. But to me, it does seem to have a little bit of a different look and feel than normal polished stainless steel. And then the other thing that really makes this particular version special is that it has this hand satin finish. Now, I've had hand satin finished blades from Jack Wolf Knives before, particularly the second version of the laid back Jack. You can see the same kind of finish there. And, I wasn't sure at first really what I thought of the hand satin, but I think on this particular knife especially, it really fits in. And that's because, this is obviously a factory-made knife, but I don't know, the combination of the wood handles, the polished, pocket clip and backspacer, and this hand satin blade, it really kind of gives it a handmade feel to it. And of course, there are hand-done operations on these knives. The covers are matched side to side and to this particular knife. There's actually, they have, I think this one had 327 written on it. I took this cover off. So they are matched. They're hand matched. It's not just like, slapping covers on. They make sure that they match. And obviously the hand satin is done by hand. And it really does. To me, it really goes well with the combination of the ironwood and the polished titanium. I think it makes for a really nice look, and particularly with this swedge, I noticed that there's a hand satin, kind of the direction of the lines is straight here, straight horizontal with the direction of the blade, but then there's also lines that go really with the direction of this swedge, and it gives it almost a two-toned look that I really, really like. I think that it is a great look on this, and really just makes this feel classy and kind of high-end. And now, of course, these are high-end knives. I mean, these one-hand opening Jack Wolf knives are $350. The slip joint or non-locking Jack Wolf knives are $300. So it's not an inexpensive knife, but in particular, I think that this one feels really fancy, high-end to me because of those features, even more so than the others that I have. And now I feel like I thought that same kind of thought about my original Gunslinger because of the gold carbon fiber and the gold pocket clip. That also had kind of a fancy look to it. And I still really love this knife. I carry this one frequently. I've carried this one every day since I've had it, but until I got it, I did continue to carry this one frequently. And the nice thing is you actually have the option of that same gold, let me see, I have the box out. What is this exactly called? Fat carbon dark matter gold cover material. So you do have the option to get this again, but it has a different blade finish. So it's not exactly the same. They never really do exactly the same configuration. But there are some other really, really cool configurations too. I actually kind of went back and forth when I was deciding which one of these to get between this and they have a checkered titanium. So it's full titanium, but it has checkering along the handle here. And the reason I was really considering that one is because, this is a gun stock pattern, and gun stocks, traditional gun stocks, like literally on a gun, often have checkering on their wooden stocks. So it fits right in, and I think it's another cool example of, taking traditional aesthetics and kind of inspiration and making it modern by putting it onto titanium rather than onto wood. And an interesting thing was I expected, and I think Ben expected too, that this would be really the hit of this run and the most popular. But on Facebook, someone made a poll of like, which one are you planning to get? And the checkered titanium was pretty far out ahead. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these sells out quicker. But one thing, I was just emailing Ben, and I think that this is one of those Jack Wolf knives that, if you are gonna get the Gunslinger Jack on this run and you don't get this one, I don't know. I think you might wish that you had. Now, I'm not telling you, which to get, or even, that you have to get one of these. I'm sure you'd be able to get one in the future on the secondary market. And I know that these are expensive, not discounting that whatsoever. But I just think that this one feels special to me. I think that this particular configuration does feel special to me. Now, I want to point out some differences between this and the previous run. The first thing I'm going to point out here is actually something that might not be true across all of these. But for me, my second run, this Gunslinger Jack, has a lighter detent than the first one. The first one, actually, when I got it, I was like, wow, this is the best detent that I've ever had on a front flipper. And it works great. It's very snappy. It's a relatively strong detent, I would say. And it works, great for the middle finger flick and the thumb roll. But then the after hours Jack, which is the coffin-handled Barlow modern knife, front flipper, that Jack Wolf Knives has done, had a lighter detent. And at first, because of this, I was a little thrown off, but I actually came to really like it. It's just easier on your thumb. You know, it doesn't tear up your thumb as much. By the way, that is actually not from flipping these. I actually am not 100% sure how I got this little cut here, but anyway, it's healed up, so we're good to go. But I did end up liking the lighter detent on the After Hours Jack. So when I got this one, I do feel that it's a lighter detent, but other people on Facebook were actually saying the opposite. They were saying that they felt that this second run had a stronger detent than the first run. So it's something that's on a kind of spectrum. It's a range of acceptable, tolerance basically for these knives. And so you can have some variation. Maybe I got one on the heavier side for the first run and one on the lighter side for the second run. That's very possible that would happen. Now, another difference here is that the blade is actually a little thicker ground on this one. Now, that is not to say that it is thickly ground. I want to emphasize that here because, like I said, I've carried and used this knife since getting it, and I think that this is a really great slicer as compared to any other modern knife. It has a very nice slicey grind. I want to compare it to this Civivi. Civivi does a really good job, and We Knives and even Sencut does a really good job of grinding their knives nice and thin. But the Gunslinger Jack here, even being thicker than the original version, still is slicier. It has a better slicing grind. So you're still going to get a really nice slicey blade, but it's just a little thicker. Ben said that the thinness of these, which if you look at the tip, you can tell that there's some difference there. Ben said that the thinness of the first run actually created some centering issues because of how thin they were ground. I would also imagine that if you did accidentally get your tip of this knife stuck in something and twisted it all, it would be more likely to snap off than this knife. So you'll get a little bit more durability, and you're still going to get great slicing. Another thing that I wanted to point out on the grind on this is how really even the secondary bevel is, and hopefully you can see that. It's something that a lot of knives don't have a super even secondary bevel, particularly GECs, often are very thick towards the tip, and Spydercos recently for me have had pretty uneven bevels and secondary bevels, and so you see that pretty often. But this, hopefully if you can tell, is very, very even in the angle from side to side at the tip there. So I do appreciate that. Now, one thing that I feel is different on mine, but that Ben said was not intentional, is the lock bar insert. So if you look at the two lock bars here, you can see this lock bar, it has an insert. You can see that it does have an insert there, but there's very, very little space, at least at the front, between the actual titanium lock bar and where it interfaces with the blade. So you can't even really see the lock bar insert, whereas on the newer version, it's pretty significant. It's very obvious that you can see that it is the lock bar insert interfacing with the blade. Ben said that wasn't intentional. I didn't get a chance to send him some pictures of this yet, but for example, again here, I don't know how well you can tell what that's looking like, but you can see the same thing. You can see the lock bar insert on the newer version and can't see it really on the older version. So it's interesting to hear that wasn't intentional. I would guess that it's something where when they are finishing these knives and making sure that they lock up correctly, they basically have to grind that lock bar insert down some to make the lock interface at the right angle, or kind of percentage across the face of the tang. And to do that, they just didn't need to grind as much off on this one and needed to grind some more off on this one. So again, that's not something that I know will be across the board, and probably doubt that it will be across the board on these, but it's something that I noticed on mine. Now, the action on this, speaking of it being lighter, is really, really nice. So I have not adjusted the action at all. The only thing I've really done to this knife is lightly touch up the edge after I cut on a ceramic plate, and then I did take this cover off, which I'll talk about in a second. But really nice action, super smooth, easy to middle finger flick, very easy in middle finger flick. That's actually probably the way that I've been opening it the most, partly because I had this cut for part of the time that I was carrying it, but easy to thumb roll and very easy to front flip. I think that the opening methods on these are great. I love that it doesn't have a traditional flipper or a thumb stud, so that it keeps that really traditional outline. But you have those 3 opening methods that are frankly very fidgety. It's very satisfying to open this in any of those ways, but particularly the front flipper and the middle finger flick, and very, very smooth. Nice sound. That's something that Ben mentioned in his video on these knives, is that they have a beautiful sound to them. I want you to hear that again. Just a really nice kind of snick. Really, really nice there. And once on the front flip, really nice sound to them. And just very solid, no side-to-side play even when unlocked. Actually, with these one-hand open Jack Wolf knives, I often am like, there must be blade play, right? Like, there's no way that it's this smooth without blade play, but there isn't. I haven't had blade play on any of them. And it's just very smooth. And one thing I've kind of also noted is they do sell skiff bearings for these that you can replace the bearings. And honestly, I'm like, how can it be any smoother? Like, it's as smooth as it gets. I don't know what it would feel like to be smoother. So that's an interesting thing. I haven't tried the skiff bearings yet, but it would be interesting to see what the difference would actually be. But the other thing that I did do was take this scale off. And the reason for that is because I do have a very slight little gap right here. And I kind of wanted to check out what was going on there. You can kind of feel the lip of the cover right here. And it turns out that there actually is kind of a knot in the wood back here that I think probably has caused just a little bit of shifting. And, something where you have to remember, this is a natural handle material. It's going to have some changes. It might move a little bit, just a little bit different than the synthetic handle materials like fat carbon, like I showed you on the original Gunslinger. And so for me, that's not a problem. It hasn't reduced my enjoyment of the knife. If you're buying this partly because you want to post it on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to see that little gap. But it was interesting to see that there was actually kind of a little knot beneath there. I even, to be completely honest, tried to kind of glue it down. Didn't go great, so I got rid of that. Other than that, though, the fit of the covers to the bolsters and to the liners is really, really great. And I think that's something that probably a lot of people might not even notice. You can see that it is a pretty small gap there. It's something that wouldn't be unusual even with synthetic handle materials on most modern knives, I would say. It's just something that it's actually one of the things that I check for on traditional knives, particularly like GEC knives. So it's something that I noticed there when I was doing the unboxing. But it really doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the knife. I have really enjoyed carrying and using this knife. Like I said, I think that it's a really special version, a really special Jack Wolf Knives knife because of how well these features come together with the Ironwood, the polished clip and backspacer, and the hand satin blade. So I just wanted to real quick show you a traditional gunstock jack. And speaking of which, if you're interested in the pattern, I definitely suggest checking out my video on the original sharpshooter jack, where I talk more about this pattern. And I'll put a link in the description or in the video here. And then I wanted to show you my only other Ironwood knife, which is a Barlow from Tracy LaRocque, just as a quick comparison. So I want to say a huge thank you to Ben and Donnie and everyone at Jack Wolf Knives for giving me the opportunity to check this out. I think that this is a really special knife, really beautiful knife, and I think a lot of people are going to be really, really happy with them. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.